Have you ever stopped to think about what really makes you, you? So much of who we become, our talents, how we trust people, even how we sleep, it was all fundamentally wired into us during these incredibly short but powerful windows in our first few years of life. So let's dive into the fascinating science behind these developmental windows.
Okay, so here's the core idea. Picture this. You're building a house. You pour the foundation, right? And for a very short time, that concrete is wet. It's soft. You can shape it. But then it hardens into solid stone. Well, our brains are a lot like that. They have what scientists call critical periods, these golden windows of opportunity where specific experiences are absolutely essential to wire our minds for the rest of our lives.
And look, this isn't just some nice little metaphor. This is a proven biological fact, and it's backed by some truly mind-blowing science. It all comes down to a really simple but powerful idea. Use it or lose it.
So how do we know this? Well, it all started with a couple of Nobel Prize-winning studies. First, you have Konrad Lorenz, who discovered that little goslings would imprint on the first moving thing they saw. But here's the catch. It only worked if it happened within a super tight 12 to 17-hour window after they hatched. Miss that window, and it's gone. Then, a few decades later, scientists found that if you temporarily close one of a kitten's eyes from birth, the brain literally rewires itself to ignore that eye permanently. The brain basically decided, well, we're not using this one, and shut it down. The brain had a deadline.
So what does this mean for us, for humans? Well, it turns out we have 5 of these huge developmental windows that open and close in early childhood, and they shape everything from our basic senses to how we connect with other people.
Let's kick things off with the very first one, and it's something you might not even think of as a learned skill, and that's sleep. Believe it or not, the entire foundation for how you sleep is laid down before you even take your first breath.
That's right. This critical window happens in the womb. A baby's sleep-wake cycles get hardwired during pregnancy. Now here's why that's so important. If those cycles get disrupted, say if the mother drinks alcohol regularly, it can throw off that wiring and potentially set that child up for a whole lifetime of sleep problems. The concrete on that foundation sets really, really early.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which kicks into high gear the moment we're born. And this is all about how we see the world. This is the vision window.
So this window for our vision is wide open from birth until about age 5. And during this time, our brain isn't just seeing, it's learning how to see. And this is a perfect real-world example of use it or lose it. If a baby is born with a cataract and doctors remove it early, they develop normal vision. But if that same surgery is delayed past age 5, the damage can be permanent. The brain's window is closed. This is also why there's growing concern about too much screen time for little kids. It can actually change the physical development of the eye.
All right, this next window isn't about a physical sense like sight or hearing. It's about something much deeper, something emotional that really forms the basis for every relationship we'll ever have. It's the window for trust.
From the moment we're born until about 2 years old, we need consistent love and care to build what's called a secure attachment with our parent or caregiver. This bond is literally the bedrock for our ability to trust. If that bond is unreliable or worse, broken, a child can develop an insecure attachment, and that can lead to a lifetime of struggling with trust, pessimism, or anxiety. It becomes the blueprint for how they see the world.
Okay, next up is the critical window for hearing, and this one is directly tied to one of the most fundamental human skills we have, the ability to speak.
See, the brain absolutely needs to hear sounds to build the neural pathways for speech. And this window is open from birth, but it starts to narrow pretty fast. A perfect example is children who are born deaf. If they get a cochlear implant before they're 3, they usually develop speech almost perfectly. But if they get that exact same implant after age 7, they often struggle with speech for the rest of their lives. The window was already closing.
And that leads us right into our final, and maybe the most complex window of all, the one for acquiring language itself.
Now, this window stays open for a pretty long time, all the way from birth to puberty. But it's not the same the whole time. It gets harder and harder. Studies on immigrants have shown this so clearly. A person's mastery of grammar is directly linked to the age they arrived in a new country. The results are undeniable. The later they arrived, the worse their grammar scores were. And there was a massive drop-off right around puberty.
The most tragic real-world example of what happens when you miss this window is the story of a girl named Jeannie Wiley. She was horrifically abused and deprived of almost all human contact until she was 13. And even with years of therapy, she could never grasp grammar. Her sentences were always short, fragmented, almost like telegrams from a place of deep pain. Father hit arm, big wood, Jeannie cry. It is an absolutely heartbreaking reminder of what is at stake when these windows close.
So you can see how all these different windows define so much of our most basic human abilities. Which brings us right back to that first idea, doesn't it? The foundation for our life is poured, and the concrete starts to set, locking in the fundamental structures of who we are.
Let's just walk through this timeline. It starts in the womb, where our sleep patterns get set. By age 5, the vision window is pretty much closed. By age 7, a lot of these critical periods are already over. And then by puberty, the language window flattens out, but our brains shift to become hypersensitive to social stuff. Feedback, risks, rewards. You can just see it, can't you? Piece by piece, the blueprint of our core self gets locked in. You know, Konrad Lorenz, the scientist with the Goslings who started this whole field of study, he summed it up perfectly. He said, "I consider early childhood events as most essential to a man's scientific and philosophical development. That foundation, it supports the entire building."
So, a huge part of our foundation is set in those first few years. For better or worse, the concrete is mostly hard. But you know what? That's not the end of the story. It just raises a final, really powerful question for every single one of us. Knowing that our foundation is set, what are we going to choose to build on top of it today?